Hi everyone, I'm Cody W3AMG with Bridgecom Systems, and today we're going to be going over some of the basic DMR jargon and terminology that's thrown around all the time that can be really confusing as a beginner into DMR. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I get asked all the time is code plug. What is a code plug? It can be a little bit confusing, especially with all the other things that are thrown around out there. But a code plug is really pretty simple. We'll break it down. It is simply just the file of all of the information that's stored on your radio. It's not a physical device, it's just a file, a list of all that information. So if you were to read from your radio on a computer, you're going to get a file. That's what we refer to as a code plug. Or some people share that file with a friend. Let's say they programmed up a bunch of information in their radio. They want to give that to a friend so they can also use that if they're local. That will be giving your friend your code plug. So that's what a code plug is, pretty simple. Now the next one we get asked a lot is, what is a talk group? If you're new to the world of digital and DMR, talk groups, you never heard of them before. So a talk group is basically it's on the digital network, but it's a group or a room where lots of people can talk together. So if you're on a DMR server, you're able to connect with a talk group and talk to people around the world. So they have different talk groups for different things, like statewide talk groups. There's a talk group for here in Missouri. There's a talk group for every other state out there. There's a talk group for worldwide. There's talk groups for different countries, for different activities. There's a talk group for blind hams. There's a talk group for just about everything you can think of. But it allows you to connect either via a DMR repeater or a DMR hotspot to everyone else in that talk group. So it's basically just a way of linking people together, but that's what a talk group does. Now what about a channel? Channels are pretty simple, and they really haven't changed that much in DMR. Still going to be channels on your radio just like before in an analog situation, and you'll still rotate your channel knob to go through your different channels. Now if you have talk groups, if you're using digital, most likely if you're talking on a SkyBridge or just a local repeater and don't move around that much, you'll be adding a channel for each talk group. So each talk group you'll make another channel for. That way you can just rotate your channel knob to go through your talk groups. Zones. What are zones? This is another thing. This could apply for both DMR or analog radio, but we get asked this a lot with this radio. What do zones do? So zones, the best way I like to break it down, zones are almost like folders on your radio. They allow you to organize all of your frequencies into different sections. Instead of just having one big massive list of frequencies and channels, zones actually organize everything. So that way you can rotate your channel knob to rotate the channels within a zone, and then you can press this button here, the up and down button, to go through your different zones. Color code. What's a color code? So color codes are very similar in the user functionality, not in the technical, but the user functionality to a tone on your radio. So if you were to set like a PL tone, that's going to do a similar thing as setting a color code in digital. I understand the technicalities are not quite the same there, but in the functionality it's going to do a very similar result for you. So you can have different color code set that will keep everyone out who doesn't have that color code set. It's just basically almost like a password protection for that repeater or that system or channel, whatever you're trying to talk to. Time slot. What's a time slot? Time slots are, the best way to think about it is there's two different time slots, and that allows multiple people to talk on a repeater at the same time. So if you have a DMR repeater, one of the cool things is it actually splits it into two different time slots, and you can have two different conversations going on that repeater at the same time. So if you want to have one time slot dedicated to a specific service, and then another time slot maybe is open for all kinds of other things, you can segment that repeater with those two time slots. So from a user perspective, we just have to make sure we're using the correct time slot for the correct purpose. Contact list. What is a contact list? So if you're from the world of analog radio, probably contact list you wouldn't have had one, or it might not even make sense what it is. So a contact list is quite literally the list of people out there in DMR. In fact, it's growing every day, and it's important to have a radio that actually has a big enough list to hold everyone. A lot of radios can't actually hold the entire digital contact list anymore. So it is quite literally just a list of every single person who is registered on DMR. And what that allows you to do in your radio, you can actually see the person's information, their call sign, all that cool stuff when you're talking to them, as long as your radio has that list. So you can basically just download the entire list from radioid.net and then throw it in your radio and you'll be rocking and rolling. DMR ID. What is a DMR ID? So if you're going to use DMR, you actually have to have what's called a DMR ID. Also, some people know it as a radio ID. Now this can be obtained from radioid.net. Some great folks over there. It's pretty simple to get, but you just have to have one to use DMR. If you have a call sign, you don't have to really do anything else. You just have to show Radio ID that you have one, and they will issue you an ID. Once you have that, you just put that in your radio, and you're up and running. And finally, this one we hear quite a bit. What's a group call or a private call? So when you're setting up your channels, you can select in your talk groups for either a group call or a private call. Now the difference is, with a group call, you're going to be talking to a group. So most talk groups you're actually going to set up as a group as opposed to a private call. Because obviously if you want to talk to, let's say, the Texas talk group, you don't want to just talk to one person or yourself. You want to talk to lots of people in that talk group. Now the only time you'll use a private call typically is if you're setting up like a parrot, for example, where you want it to talk back to you, but you don't want everyone else to hear. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you learned something from today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell next to it and make sure you don't miss out on any more great content. That's all I have for you today. I'm Cody, W3AMG 73.